And this verse, I think, is the reason that as the Babylonian captivity came about, Daniel was in captivity to the king Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. And it's written in Daniel chapter 6, verse 10, that Daniel knelt and prayed through an open window 3 times a day toward Jerusalem, even though he was in Babylon. And that's, I think that this verse is the reason he prayed toward this place. And of course, today we don't need to pray toward Jerusalem. Why? Well, number one, God doesn't live among man on earth in Jerusalem at this time. He's in heaven. So, and we can pray anywhere, anytime, standing any way we want, in any direction we want. Verse 30. And hearken thou to the supplication of thy servant and of thy people Israel, when they shall pray toward this place, and hear thou in heaven thy dwelling place, and when thou hearest, forgive. Solomon knew that we all sin, that we all fall short, and including himself, as we'll see in later parts of his verse, either late today or early tomorrow. But under grace, if we repent and ask for forgiveness, God forgives and the slate is wiped clean. And we're going to be talking about the blessings and curses of God as we work our way through this chapter. And once God has placed a curse on you, the only way to remove it is for you to repent and to obtain forgiveness. Verse 31, if any man trespass against his neighbor, and an oath be laid upon him to cause him to swear, and the oath come before thine altar in this house. Now what this is talking about is in Leviticus chapter 5. It talks about trespass offerings of man to another Israelite. And what this is talking about is that if someone trespassed against a fellow Israelite, they had to recompense the damage plus a fifth part. In other words, plus 20%. In other words, if a man entrusted his neighbor with 5 of his sheep, and the neighbor did something that caused the sheep to die, he was responsible because he had been entrusted. And not only was he have to replace the 5 sheep that by his fault died, he would have to add to that a fifth part, 20%. In other words, it would require 6 sheep to make things right under that case. Now, this prayer, though, is if and those circumstances applied that I just mentioned, if the person that caused the trespass admitted their guilt. And what this is going to be talking about in the following verses, if the person did not admit their guilt. Verse 32, then hear thou in heaven, and do, hear the oath in heaven, in other words, and do and judge thy servants, condemning the wicked to bring his way upon his head. Let the merited punishment come upon him, and justifying the righteous to give him according to his righteousness. In other words, if someone made an oath to do something and then broke that oath, let them suffer the consequences. And if you ever think that the wicked get ahead, this verse should point to the fact that the wicked don't get ahead. The wicked, their own wickedness comes upon their own head. We have a Psalm 37, which covers if you think people that are wicked get ahead and prosper. It's Psalm 37. It's an acrostic psalm, and in that acrostic is you find in verses 7, 20, and 34. And what marks those verses as special, in the Hebrew language, stick with me, in the Hebrew language, there are 3 lines in each of those verses. And the rest of the verses in Psalm 37 have 4 lines. So it says, look at these 3 verses 7, 20, and 34. And if you look at those 3 verses alone, we learn that the wicked don't get ahead, that the wicked are just like the fat of a lamb that's sacrificed on the altar. When the fat hits the hot coals, it goes psst and goes up forever and ever into smoke. And then finally in verse 34, that if you're one of God's elect, you have the privilege of watching the wicked go into the lake of fire.